Hello there, I'm Ian Toombs from gofishing.co.uk and welcome to another part of our extensive ground bait series, and this one's covering feeder fishing. Now in front of me I've got two mixes of ground bait, and the great thing about feeder fishing is you can put any ground bait through a feeder, whether it's a cage feeder such as this or an open end feeder such as that. You can put anything in there at all, punch, crumb, right through to the most complex continental ground baits you can possibly find. Right, so these ground baits have been mixed up quite light and fluffy. They hold together perfectly. You don't want it too damp, too sticky, because the ground bait inside there needs to almost explode out of the feeder. So just mix it as per we described in part 2 of this series and make it nice and fluffy like that. Okay, now one mistake that a lot of feeder anglers make, and this is myself included years ago, was to mix up the ground bait first, like so, and then simply go, right, okay, I'm going to be fishing for tench and bream today, say. So what I'm going to do is put a load of sweet corn in there and a load of pellets, like that. And then I'm going to mix it all around, like so. Get it all thoroughly mixed. And then I'm going to fish with it, like that, all day long. Right, the first mistake is the addition of these pellets. Now those pellets there are dry, so they will absorb the moisture from inside the ground bait. You've made the ground bait quite fluffy anyway, or you should have done, so there's not that much water in there anyway. So all the water will be drawn into these pellets and the ground bait will soon become unusable. So another key mistake made there is to load up this ground bait with food at the start of the session. Now I'm going to show you something now. I'll take 2 feeders, exactly the same, like so. Now we'll load this one up using just by pushing it into the mix, like so, and plugging the ends. Now that's from this mix. And now we're going to use this ground bait mix and show you how it should be done. Now we'll get some sweet corn, put it in a little pile there, get some pellets, put in a pile there, and then take your feeder and push with your thumb, push the particles inside the feeder and plug both ends like so. Okay, now I'm going to show you the difference. As in my little storeroom down here, I've got some paper. Right, so we've got the 2 mixes there. If I take out the food from this ground bait feeder, like so, and then take out the food from that ground bait feeder, and you'll be able to see the difference. Now look inside there. This is the one that's been mixed previously, and this is the one that I've scooped up. Now you can see there, you might be able to pick out the pellets, but there's twice as many pellets and twice as many grains of corn inside the second mix as opposed to the first mix. Now let me just disregard this a second. Now, putting particles onto your ground bait, like so, like that, and then scooping the feeder through the particles and plugging both ends, using that technique you can monitor and determine exactly the amount of feed that you're putting in per cast. Now using the first method, where I just simply tipped in a bowl, well, a tin of corn and about half a pint of pellets there, you can't really determine how much food is going in to each cast, because although this looks packed with food at the moment, all those particles are at the top. As the session progresses, you'll be feeding less and less and less. This is definitely by far the best way to load a feeder. And then also as the session progresses, you can switch to just using neat ground bait in the feeder and ease off on the feed, or you can absolutely leather the feed inside the feeder, like so. So you can see the yellow particles there of the corn, and you can add more feed as and when you need to. Okay, another tip while feeder fishing is to use one of these. Okay, if I open up this little pot here, and inside this pot we've got some snap link swivels. There's one there. Hopefully you'll be able to see that in front of the camera. But basically, if you incorporate one of these into your rig, what you can do is attach the feeder onto the link there, and then you can take away the feeder. You can add a larger feeder, a smaller feeder, or a straight lead. Alternating between the different sizes of feeder will ensure that you can put in more food, more ground bait, or less food and less ground bait. If you find the fish are sort of holding away from the ground bait, switch to a straight lead, and you can do that quickly by unclipping the snap link swivel and putting on a straight lead instead. Okay, some more tips regarding feeder fishing. Another great tip is to use the line clip on your reel. Now, most reels come with line clips nowadays, and to get the best from this little tiny and invaluable device is to make a few casts. Okay, once you've got the distance, and once you've got you use a far bank marker and aim your feeder towards that far bank marker. And once you've found the correct distance, wrap your line around the line clip a couple of times and then reel in again. And what you'll be able to achieve there is a extreme high degree of accuracy, because you've picked a far bank marker that you're aiming towards, so your feeder will always fly in the same direction. And if you cast, and as soon as you cast, put the rod to one side while the feeder's in mid-flight, you'll feel the rod bang like this when the feeder reaches the line clip, when all the line is out, and then just simply lower the rod down. Don't sort of wind the rod up, cast, and keep the rod pointing towards the feeder as it lands, because when it lands, you're going to have to move that feeder rod to your side, whether it's this side or that side. So you've got a curve in the feeder tip, okay, in the quiver tip. So always cast out, join mid-flight, put the rod to one side, leave it there, let the rod absorb the lunges as the feeder lands, and then just simply drop it to one side. Because if you have it pointing towards you, what you're going to do then is when you move the rod to the side so you can detect a bite, you're going to pull the feeder out of line. So technically the feeder's going to drop down, disperse its food, okay, and as you move the rod round, you're going to drag that feeder with it. And so therefore your food and attractant's here, but your feeder is here, out of the way of the bait, and therefore you're going to catch less fish. And then of course there's the choice of feeder, which feeder to use. Now, the two main styles is an open end feeder and a cage feeder, such as this. Now what I've found is basically water less than 4 foot deep, use a cage feeder. Water deeper than 4 foot, or on a river, something with a strong flow, use an open end feeder such as this, because this style holds onto the ground bait firmer, and it compacts the ground bait and it pushes the ground bait to the bottom, then it will disperse. Now these feeders, cage feeders, even the ones with grip mesh inside, tend to make the ground bait explode quicker, obviously because the surface area of the ground bait is larger. As you can see, there's giant holes within this feeder. So if you want to create a cloud of ground bait from your feeder and fish in shallow water from 0 depth down to 4 foot, then select one of these feeders, and the feeder will ensure that the ground bait works quicker in shallower water. Okay, and one final thing is a choice of quiver tip. Now here I've just got 2, but inside my garage I must have 50 or more quiver tips from over the years. But how do you decide which strength of quiver tip to use? Now here I've got a very, very delicate quiver tip and a fairly firm one here, fairly firm carbon. Now my advice to you is basically to use the lightest quiver tip you can possibly get away with given the circumstances. On a day like today, the water there behind me is absolutely flat calm, it's like a mill pool. There's no tow on it whatsoever, and it's a lake. So basically I can get away with using this quiver tip. Its test curve is probably ½ an ounce, maybe less. This test curve on the other hand is about 2 ounces. So do use the lightest quiver tip you possibly can, so you can detect the bites quickly, easily, and without any hindrance. And that just about wraps up feeder fishing. So best of luck, hope these tips have been handy, and join us for the next part of our ground bait instalment. Thanks for watching.